Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today for my Monday this and that video. And if you're new here, this is just a weekly vlog I do to answer questions that have come in the past week, to go over some new things going on, to give you garden updates and whatever else needs to be put out in a little bit more timely manner, and to lead you back to some old videos where I go into deeper detail about what I'm doing here, such as the vinegar, for instance. So I've been out of my floral vinegars for some time, and those are my favorites to use on my hair. I use it as a hair rinse, and if you're interested in more about natural hair care, I'll link to the most recent video I did on that in the description box down below. And it's going to be a while before I have any nasturtium flowers from this year, so I'm going to use some of my dehydrated ones from previous years, starting with the oldest batch, which is actually from 2017. So I'm going to get those used up, and my purpose for bringing that up in this video isn't just because that's what's going on this week, but is to remind people that you can make vinegar out of just about anything as long as it's edible. A lot of my floral vinegars, anything I'm going to make out of lavender, nasturtium, roses, marshmallows, that's going to be something I like to use on my hair because of what it does for the hair. Same thing for sage and rosemary, but those can also make great cleaning vinegars. Then I have just basic fruit vinegars I'll make out of excess apples, pears, whatever it is I have on hand, mango, even mango skins. A lot of times I'll use the peels of different things because mango skins don't taste very good, but yes, they are safe to eat if you don't have an allergy to them. And a lot of people do actually eat the whole fruit. But what I'll do when I get mangoes is I'll skin it, I'll use the skin, and don't worry about getting all the fruit off the skin, and I'll use that to make a really good vinegar. When I get a bunch of peaches and I'm peeling the peaches for canning, I use those peels to make a peach vinegar, and it makes a great vinegar. It's one of the best ones I make, is the one I make out of peach peels. Oh, and the pits too. And yes, you can use those pits and not be afraid of them. At any rate, let's go ahead and do this. Even though this isn't supposed to, my Monday videos aren't supposed to be instructional videos, because this is such a quick and easy process, I'll go ahead and whip up a batch right here. So because these are dried, I'm going to use just half of this pint jar. I think that's going to be plenty. I can always add more later. Now, one of the things that I find, I always can make vinegar without any kind of starter. I've never used a starter in making vinegar when it comes to fresh or dried products. But I do find when I'm doing anything with something that's been frozen, it's a little more lazy. Sometimes I can't get it to ferment at all, and sometimes it ferments but not well. So yes, while you can use frozen things, I do recommend you add some kind of starter to that, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And then if you're using anything canned, yes, you can use canned stuff, but because everything's been killed, anything alive in there's been killed in the canning process, you will need to add a starter of some sort. And what I'm going to do here is add about a little better than a half cup of sugar. And whenever I'm making a half gallon of vinegar, which I always do in half gallons, if I'm doing herbs that are very low in sugar or no sugar content at all, I usually add at least a half cup. And then if I'm doing one made from fruit, I'll usually only add a quarter cup of sugar because there's a lot of sugar already in that fruit, even in the fruit peels, such as pineapple, mango, and so on and so forth. So you don't need as much sugar. And as with any ferment, if you add too much sugar, even when making wine from the start, it can actually prevent it from fermenting at all. So you don't want to get too heavy-handed with the sugar at the beginning. Now, a lot of times I just put in a certain amount when it comes to vinegar. That's good. But if I'm uncertain of how much sugar to use, and maybe I start with a quarter cup with something like this, then once it's good and bubbly, I'll add another quarter cup or so. So I'm not getting too much from the start, but you don't want to wait too late. If you add the sugar too late, after the bubbling has slowed or stopped, then a lot of times it won't ferment all that sugar or work through that sugar, so you'll end up with a product that never really finishes. It's just maybe half sour and half sweet. Not that it can't be used for cooking and baking, or even just to use as a healthy probiotic drink. So I'm just taking a chopstick and stirring that up really well. And then whenever you're making vinegar, you don't want to cap it. You don't want to put any kind of tight-fitting cap on it. That might be okay for the first week, but at some point you have to only use a cloth covering on it because it needs oxygen. So the yeast and the bacteria inside in here that's on the whatever produce you're using, and yes, it seems to stay good even after dehydrating. The first thing they do is start eating through those sugars and converting them to alcohol, and then the oxygen converts the alcohol to vinegar. So that's where you get that. That's why wines and vinegars are made a little bit different, because if you expose wine to oxygen, then it's going to turn to vinegar and you won't have wine. So that's why we use an airlock like shown right here whenever you're making wine, but when you're making vinegar, you cover it with some kind of cloth. It can be just a dish rag with a rubber band, a piece of cotton. It has to be natural and it has to be able to breathe. These are little cotton covers one of my followers made for me a couple years ago. So these are perfect because they already have the elastic on them. I don't have to put elastic over the top. And then what you want to do is you want to stir it every day for at least 2 weeks. That's going to help prevent mold. That's going to aerate it well so it can get that oxygen working in there. And if you try to remember to do it every day anyway, it's going to take about 30 days for it to become vinegar, give or take. Remember, whenever you're working with live cultures, just like anything else, they're going to vary a little bit in how quickly they get done. Some will take longer, some will take less time, and also the temperature of your home and various other factors. So the type of water you use can also make a difference. So if you're using city water straight from the tap with the chlorine in there, that can prevent a good ferment. Sometimes it will still ferment, but it might be slow. So it's good to dechlorinate the water if you have to use city tap water. And I have a video with several different ideas of how you can do it, but really the easiest, fastest way to do it that will also remove the chloramine is to boil it. But then obviously you want to make sure it's at room temp before you start making whatever ferment that you're doing. So then if you need to use a fermentation starter of any kind just to make sure it's going to get going, a fermentation starter is super easy to make, and I have a bunch of videos out there on it. I'm going to link to my most in-depth one down below because I go over the ways you can use it, the various types of things you can use, how you can refresh it and keep it alive for years. For a half gallon, you would use a half cup of the fermentation starter. Again, just like vinegar, you can make it out of anything fresh or dried. It doesn't matter. But you can use herbs. I've used dandelion and red clover, sometimes just dandelion. I've used raisins. I've used orange peels. I've used apples. I've used grapes. I've used blueberries. Anything that's on hand that you have, that maybe something you're trying to use up, an old apple, just chop it up and put it in there. And if you watch that video, you can learn more details about it. And I will also link to my more in-depth video on vinegar making. I have a lot of vinegar videos out there, but I'll link to my most recent and in-depth one where I was making the apple, lemon and lime or something like that vinegar. And so I'll put that in the description box down below. So while we're talking about dried things, some people have been asking me a lot about the dried dandelion flowers, what I use them for, how I dehydrate them. It's one thing when it comes to any herbs, you don't want to dry them at over 110 degrees. In fact, I've got to where now that I have something where I have the kasuri, where I can see an exact temperature, I have been setting the temperature at 108 degrees. If you set it too high, it will immediately turn into a puffball. And sometimes too low can cause it to do that if it takes too long for it to dry. Since we still have fires going in the wood stove, I've been using that quite a bit. So this tray right here is some lemon balm I started yesterday. The difference is it can take a couple of days. It's not quite dry yet. It's getting there. But I brought this in to show you because I didn't have enough herbs when I was harvesting all this to fill up my dehydrator anyway, and I don't want to run my dehydrator unless I have it full. I'm the same way about my canner. If I'm going to run it on electricity, I don't worry so much when I'm able to run them off solar, but right now we're just not getting enough solar collection because it's been so dark and rainy. So I've just been using my wood stove dehydrator for that. But anyway, my dandelion flowers have been dehydrating just fine on there without turning into puff balls. I think as long as you're using a dehydrator, they'll dehydrate fast enough. You just don't want to set it above 110 degrees. And I say even 105 to 108 should be good to get those dried without them turning into a puff ball. And then how I use them, I have actually quite a bit dehydrated up, which is really good because even though I've used this in infused oils before, more specifically for the healing salve. I'm now starting to add it to my regular infused oil for my skin creams, because I'm running low on certain other flowers that I use in there and other herbs, and so I need to make up the difference. And dandelion is a great one. It's really great for skin, just overall skin health, as well as healing the skin. So it's one of the herbs I'm starting to add, along with comfrey and plantain, two other things that I can harvest quite a bit of. And of course the marshmallow. I'll still be using the rose petals and the honeysuckle as I have it. I ran out of honeysuckle, so I wasn't able to keep adding it to this year's, but hopefully I'll get enough from them this next year to keep up. We'll see. But that's the great thing about making an infused oil for skincare, even for skin healing. Use whatever herbs you have the most of. It doesn't have to be a whole bunch of different herbs. It can be just one. It can be just plantain, just comfrey, just dandelion flowers, just calendula, just rose petals, whatever it is you want to throw in there. You can use 2, 3, or 4, or 5, or 10. It's all up to you and what you have the most of. So the amounts that I use all the time keep changing. And I haven't had a lot of pansies in the last couple years, so I haven't been putting the pansies in there. And even when I do, it's just a few. So that's the main thing I've been using the dried dandelions for. But I've also used them in adding to my homemade soaps. Since I'm not selling the soaps anymore, and I don't usually make fancy soaps for us, I haven't been going through the dandelion flowers as much, but I did have a couple of different soaps I was making for the store where I added the dandelion flowers. Some I would add calendula, some I would add marshmallow, some I'd do a blend of herbs. But anyway, yes, you can add dandelion flowers to your soaps as well, since it is good for your skin. I just put the whole flower right in there and blend it up. You can pull the petals out if you want. I just don't bother with that. Then fresh dandelions, as I have them coming in, I will use those in salads, pulling the petals out when I do that. I will add whole dandelion flowers to teas, adding the dandelions to a peppermint tea or a comfrey tea or catnip or whatever it is I'm making. Throw a couple dandelion flowers in there because there's a lot of good health benefits in the dandelion. Now I do have a couple of old videos on dandelion. One is actually pretty old where I was pulling up some dandelions in the early spring by the roots. So those would have been the dandelions from the year before. So the roots were really long and I was pulling them up to harvest the roots. But mostly I like to use the flowers and the leaves. And I do have a video where I covered all parts of the dandelion and its different benefits. And so I'll link to that in the description box down below. One thing I really like doing this time of the year is, as I'm picking the dandelion flowers for dehydrating, I will go ahead and pick the stem and just munch on that. I love eating the stem. The fresher the better. As it gets later in the season, they start to get tough. You want it while it's got that sap fresh flowing in there. It's so healthy for you. And actually, when it comes to eating any part of the dandelion fresh, the stem is, I found a couple of years ago, is my very favorite part. It's when it's crunchy and it's not as bitter as the root or the leaves. It's good. I love it. And I'm getting those health benefits straight from that fresh stem. But anyway, I plan on doing a separate video just on the uses for dried flowers in general. So we got dried nasturtiums, dried marshmallow, dried rose petals, calendula, and so on. So I'm gonna, because I've been getting a lot of questions on that, so I'll do a separate video on that. Might be a few weeks out before it publishes, but we'll be watching for that for those who are interested in learning more. And I'm also going to be doing an updated video on dehydrating herbs in particular, since now I have the Kasori, which dries things a little differently than my Nesco. I like them both for different reasons, and I'm going to be going over that and how I use those for dehydrating herbs and the differences in doing the herbs on either of those two things. And then just a couple other things. Yes, I did start dehydrating my lemon balm because I've been starting to learn more about lemon balm again. It's not that I didn't read about it before, but I'm starting to compile some information for a video I'll be doing on that. And one of the things I did find out, and I wasn't surprised when I learned this, is that lemon balm is also very good for helping to calm the nerves, to bring down the stress and anxiety. So combining lemon balm with catnip is a good option. Valerian leaves are also very good for that. And the reason I say the leaves is they have a better flavor than the root, and they're not near as powerful. So people who are sensitive to valerian can handle the leaves better, so, or the flowers for that matter. And you can make yourself a nice tea from lemon balm, catnip, and the valerian leaves that can be very calming and relaxing and bring your stress levels down without it being too potent. Like I do have an extract I make from the roots, which is more specifically to help relax tense muscles and also to help with pain and with sleep. So valerian is also very good for pain, by the way. But anyway, so yeah, I've been dehydrating up some valerian leaves as well. And this is the time of year I start hacking those down because they'll just keep coming back and coming back. So getting a bunch of those put up for their different benefits. And I also have a video just on valerian that I'll link to down below. And then of course, as you can see, this is comfrey for this year that I got started. And I'll be putting up a bunch more of that. I actually have quite a bit from the past 2 years jarred up like this, but I want to get at least a couple more jars, especially now that it's going to be one of the regular ingredients in my infused oil for the skin creams. You guys know from my couple of posts I made in the community section and last week's this and that video talking about the snow. Well, it finally quit snowing off and on here. Now we're back to the regular spring rains and the weather's finally starting to warm up a little bit. But we did still go ahead, since my poor tomato plants are just, they're still not growing anymore, but they don't look as horrible as they did. But I did lose several more after last week's video, because I realized that frost had got in there and just it killed a bunch of them, unfortunately. But I should be getting some more starts coming up soon. Hopefully it won't be too late for me to get tomatoes, because in this case it's been so cold. We did take some of the insulation that we get in the Misfits market boxes that I've been saving up, and Patrick filled in all the soffits around the greenhouse to help insulate it better. And then I also took the mylar, put that behind the plants, and then enclose that in black plastic to help absorb more heat and also reflect light back onto the plants. Then just yesterday I plugged in a lamp with an incandescent light bulb in it, and it's running off our solar power right now to help add extra heat in there without it getting too hot into that little enclosed section. So we'll see how that does. Just taking some extra measures, and we are getting more serious about totally enclosing that main section of the garden area too. Doing whatever we can, because it just seems like each year keeps getting colder and colder. And then one more thing I want to mention, depending on how things go over the next couple of weeks, it's possible I may have to just cut back a little bit on YouTube as far as how many videos a week I'm putting out. I don't know. Things just keep getting more and more crazy, and I've got to find ways to reduce the amount of stress in my life. And the first thing I'm going to start with is cutting back on how many comments I'm interacting with, because it's just getting too hard for me to keep up. I do try to read them all, but something has got to give in order for me to not be so stressed out, especially with trying to build my Rumble right now too. That one's not so hard really, but I certainly can't keep up on comments on Rumble at all, because there's no place where I can read all the comments in one place. I don't have the time to click on every video every day to see if there's any new comments. I just can't do that. So what I recommend you do, if you have an important question, don't message me on Patreon, don't message me on Facebook, don't message me anywhere except for through email. So that's raincountryhomestead@gmail.com. So if you have any important questions you really need answered, and that's the one place that I can interact better. I'm more likely to see your question, because it can be days or a week before I go into Patreon and see, and I never think to check to see if I have messages there. So don't message me there. And same thing with Facebook. In fact, I set my Facebook pages up so there's automatic responses. So email me. That's the best place to contact me, and just give me time, especially if your email is really long. It could take me days before I can get to it. Just understand that. So anyway, I hope that helps, and don't forget to check out our Rumble account. I am putting up older videos there. Now I'm kind of to the point where I'm just uploading having the older videos published on the weekends, and then the new videos published at the same time as they do here on YouTube, so that I can have both places. But you might want to at least drop in on the weekends and see what videos are over on Rumble that I've had here that you might have missed. So I'm trying to put the ones I think are most important or people would enjoy the most over there or learn the most from. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed my this and that video for the week. Go ahead and share with us down below what you got dehydrating this week or canning, or how your gardens are doing. Are you able to plant anything yet? And you might still live in those areas that are covered in snow. I get it. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.